Hello and welcome back to the Growth Circle podcast. I'm your host, Lincoln Amstutz, and today I'm very excited for this interview I get to have with Michael Thomas. Before I introduce him, a little bit about Michael. He is a real estate professional here in the Southwest Missouri area and has been an agent and investor for over 8 years now. He's certainly one of the most successful individuals, young individuals here in the Southwest Missouri area, and he's been a great help to me in my start and growth through real estate. So without further ado, Michael, welcome to the Growth Circle podcast.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you here. Yes, sir.
This is actually the first podcast I've ever been on. So trial through error. Here we go.
There we go. I'm glad this could be the first one for you. Well, thanks for taking some time here. Right off the bat, I wanted to ask, I was actually looking through some of your Facebook feed and what you're working on, and I was going to just kind of start it off by asking, how do you go from having no experience, nothing in real estate, to now I saw you're doing 27 active renovations as of last month. Can you take us through that journey of how you got started and bringing you to where you're at?
You bet. We'll go as far as we can backwards.
Let's do it.
We'll go back to even the middle school days. So in 7th grade, where it all started, 7th grade, one of my buddies and I, we had a small cattle operation in Fairgrove. And so we started with 7 and got it to 22 by the time we were juniors in high school. And so moving off to school, I was going to go to Mizzou and be a vet. And so I did that first year, didn't like it. And we ended up deciding to split the cattle operation then. And so we both sold our half. And I think we both ended up with like $11,000 and some change. And in high school, I actually flipped cars. And so I'd find a car that had terrible pictures. It was beat up. And I'd just take better pictures, clean it up, drive it around for 6 months and make $1,500. So, as a high schooler, having that car to drive and then at the end making $1,500 it was pretty interesting. And so to combine those two, my parents, actually my mom, had been in real estate since about 2000. And at the time they had 25, 30 rentals or so. And I hated it because I was always the kid that was cleaning them out. And so, me being an 8-year-old kid cleaning out these horrendous rentals, I was just like, why would anyone ever want to do this? This is miserable. I hate this. I'm never going to do this. And so then I got my freshman year at Mizzou. I thought I didn't really enjoy the school atmosphere and always had been around entrepreneurs. My family's full of them. And so I asked my mom, I said, I want to move back to Springfield. I was going to go to Missouri State, which I did continue and graduate from Missouri State. But at that time, my freshman year, I was like, what should I do? I have some money. I want to invest it. And she said, well, how about we make a plan for you to come back here and invest in real estate? And so that's what we did. And man, I moved back to Springfield in that fall. So the first semester of my sophomore year at college, I bought an $11,900 house off of National and Chestnut.
Okay.
And I lived in it, and I put about $3,500 or $4,000 into it, just minuscule stuff and items that I could do while I was living there, paint walls, flooring. And then I sold it for $25,000 and I got a $10,000 check and just repeated it.
And that was the start.
That was the start.
So this was an $11,000 house that you bought and moved into.
Mm-hmm. So I put about $3,000 down. So, you have to put your 20% down payment, which in retrospect, I guess you don't have to do now. So all those different strategies we can discuss. But, back when I first started, it's 20% down, do the renovation, then sell it. And so I didn't even know about refinancing. I was just brand new. I'm going to do a flip house. And so my mom was going to walk me through it and got that check and never looked back. It wasn't much. I mean, now, I guess $10,000 is a lot of money. But in retrospect, at the time, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is a single check. I was working as a busboy then at Applebee's, and so my weekly checks were $450, and so it was brutal. Wanted to figure something out.
Right. Well, it sounds like you made it happen there, which is pretty awesome. That you, of course, like you said, there maybe nowadays you could have deployed a different strategy to get in, but you just did what you knew to do and put down that 20% and got in a good deal and made it work really well. And it's cool that you were able to do that because of, I'm sure, some of the savings you had built up from the, with the cattle and with the cars. That kind of sets you up so that you'd be ready for that when you came back and wanted to jump into it.
Looking back on it, I mean, back in 2013, 14, I mean, internet pages took 7, 8, 10 seconds to load still. And so all the information that we have today and that you especially have compounded on, and in the last probably 4 or 5 years, social media, you can find just a rabbit hole to go down on all these gurus going about different strategies. And, if you pick one and you spend time on it, you can usually, be very successful at it. But I mean, when I started, the information really wasn't there and it wasn't fast. Social media was still just like you're posting on Instagram and you have 8 filters to choose from and that's that. But now it's, you can get on Instagram, TikTok, and you can find all these different strategies, so much information on it. So I'd say in the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, if you started in that time, this is like the start of all these different ways that you can, back then it was like the courses or the, people would come to town and sell you on, these 3-day workshops. And so the information, at least when I started, wasn't quite to where it is now, which is, very, very different.
How did you initially kind of educate yourself as you were getting into real estate? And was it through meeting with people online, somewhat like you're saying, or like how did you initially look into real estate, knowing that you were interested in it? Was it, because you mentioned your parents were there, what was that start like?
In the beginning, it was 100% my mom. And so I just relied on my mom and her strategies and, where she'd been, her contractors. And then after that, and I'll never forget this time in my life, was I had 4 houses. And so I'd bought and sold a few, flipped a few, and then I finally got to where I had my personal residence and 3 rentals. And I didn't really know much about real estate, but I knew how to flip a house, which is very different in the continuum of, how much you learn. At that point, I'll never forget, after Christmas, buying Christmas gifts for my family, standing there at the mall, I had $121 in my bank account. And that's it. Like, that's all the cash I had. And so I had these 4 houses. I had no cash, which was very dumb, starting out, new investor, 2 years in maybe, and very, very cash poor. And my mom always told me, when you're in real estate, you're land rich and cash poor. Seems like what you always feel like. But I'll never forget that time where I got $121 in my bank account and had to kind of go backwards. And, really to go back on the education side, that was the point when I was like, I got some money back for Christmas and I spent it all on books. I bought 17 real estate books. And so I just dove into all those, tried to figure out different strategies, and then really dove into the YouTube videos.
That's huge. It's such a cool story, just part of your journey where you got into that initial property, flipped it after living in it. You're at this point of having 4 houses, one of those you live in. And then, but yeah, so was it the fact that all of your money at the time you were just putting towards getting those rentals because you just wanted them so bad? And then, you got to that point, you're like, okay, I need some cash here as well. Was that essentially?
I fell into the beginner's trap, and this is terrific advice. The beginner's trap is always you buy something that cash flows. I mean, it's still great advice. You obviously want to buy properties that cash flow, but whenever I first started, it was only cash flow, and I didn't take into consideration the houses that weren't in the greatest areas and that were a little bit older. I didn't have experience in inspections and how to inspect the houses properly, and to just account for that all the mechanical systems are older. And so mechanical systems, all your wiring's older, all your plumbing's older, all the joists are older, the foundation's older. I mean, everything's just, 80, 90 years older in these areas that cash flow better. And so I thought I was in a good cash position at 20 years old, at 4 houses. And, I thought it was great, cool. I have, $300,000, $400,000 in real estate as a 20-year-old. I thought I was making it big, but there was a time when there was problems at those houses, and there was items that came up that were unexpected that I had to pay for. And you burn through cash really quick when you don't account for materialistic things on older houses. And so that's kind of the position I got myself into. had to actually take a loan from my mom to be able to make those repairs and then be able to sell and kind of go backwards and then figure out the business side of real estate investing.
Right, right. So did that change then the types of properties you were investing in after that point? Did you get kind of a criteria of areas or year builds, or how did that change the types of properties you look for, or did it? And did you keep those original ones, and kind of what happened at that point?
For some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to go against the tried and true advice of location, location, location. And so, man, I dialed in that really hard. I had sold all 4 of those. And then I just went for the 3, 1.5, 1, 3, 2, 2, and it had to be in a good area. And so I figured out then through those books what the BRRRR strategy was. And so I went, which, is a game changer for any real estate investor once you figure that system out and how it works.
Right. Could you speak into that just a little bit, the BRRRR strategy, what that process looks like?
You bet. So there's books on it, podcasts on it, and there's hundreds of thousands of articles, you name it, on the BRRRR strategy. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but it's you purchase a home, which is the B, which is buy, and then you renovate the home. So you get in there and do some repairs to it, correct all the problems with it. Hopefully you find a house that, is in some sort of disrepair. So you renovate it, which is the first R. And then you rent it. Is that the second one?
Yeah, I believe that's second R, rent.
So you get it rented, and then you refinance it, and then you repeat. And then some people put an S on the end for scale, or some people put another letter on the end for something else. But so yeah, you buy, renovate, then you get a tenant in there to pay for your payment and hopefully some cash flow on top of that. And then at that point, the bank will see how much you're making on that, or how much it's written for, and then that will kind of justify sometimes how much they can give you a bank loan for. And then so on the buy side, you'd hopefully figure out a way to buy something in cash. And so that's definitely a game changer, is how to find it in cash. And then if you don't have the cash, look for other investors or family members that have the money sitting in a savings account that's earning 0.5% in interest a year. You might offer them 5, 6, 7, 10% or a fee to use that cash, and then do the BRRRR strategy, and it's repeatable. But to go back on your previous question, was I went to the 3-2-2 strategy. Has to be in a good area, and my main thing was learning how to pre-screen tenants before they move in. That is one of my main things now. It's definitely pre-screening. I still manage my rentals. I'm trying to build a team around that right now. But yeah, it's definitely pre-screening to get good house, good area, and hopefully you've done a majority of the repairs that need to be done. And so you don't usually hear from those tenants. I have many that I have, 8 months, 9 months, 10 months that I haven't heard a single thing from them, because they're, a young professional or a mid-tier professional that has downsized. They're just looking for a good house, good area. And I think it's bulletproof.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew that you did some of the management yourself, and so I definitely want to get more into that. Just to back up a little bit on, at that time where you had these 3 rentals, where were you? I know you've done, retail sales on the real estate side as well. Where was like the cash flow getting generated from to, be actually making some money during this time? And then as well as, with that, where did you then get your financing from for the next rentals? Was it from doing some work yourself? Was it from borrowing from different places?
With the limited knowledge I had, so this would have been about 2015 and 16, it was my strategy then was I had to flip a house to be able to then say if I made $40,000 on a flip, I would put 20 towards the next flip, 20 towards the down payment. And then that flip, is like this such a slow way to do. I mean, in my eyes now, it was such a slow way to do it. And so, I would buy 2 to 3 maybe rentals a year. And so I was on such a small growth trajectory. So I would just use it was my own funds at that time. And it was kind of hard without having a full-time job. And then in 2016, it was one of my biggest flips I sold, which wasn't very much money, and I realized how much the agent was making. And so I was like, I can make, save this $7,000 by just getting my real estate license. And so I got my license. It's pretty much $1,500 to start from start to finish. So I thought it was relatively cheap for startup. And then I got my license and then sold that house myself. And it was like I saved $5,500, and so I've had my license ever since as a tool, in my tool belt.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. I didn't realize, okay, so you started out with just doing some of these renovations yourself, or doing the renovations, hiring it out, whatnot, and then flipping some to pay for the rental properties that you decided, you wanted to keep. And then you, at a certain point, got into actually selling some houses on the market to make some of that extra income. Is that something you have continued since then? Being on the agent side and generating cash that way?
You bet. So I started my agency life at Keller Williams, which I would recommend anyone to do. Their training systems are second to none. They just have the training figured out, and it would exponentially expedite your learning curve if you were to get your real estate license. But I started there, and Gary Keller, the co-owner, I guess he's the main guy at Keller Williams. I'll never forget the time that I watched one of his, I forget what it's called. They have like a big hoorah meeting at every 6 months or every year. And he said you should get your real estate license to be an investor first, because you have access to the MLS. And so I thought that was so odd that he would say, against what his company is about transacting, the transacting side about real estate, and not investing. But he said you have the number one tool in front of your eyes to use as an agent, which is the MLS, which, take that as you will. It might be, second or third on some people's list of, higher ranked tools that they use in their business. But the data wise, it's incredible. That's, where a lot of people go to source their deals. And now there's many softwares that source data from the MLS that investors use. But that was definitely a turning point whenever he said, to get your licenses for the investment purposes. So I definitely feel like I lived that out through trial and error. My first year in real estate sales, I think I made $17,000. So very small, but I've always been an investor first, to answer your question.
Right. That's neat though, that, you started on the investment side. That's what you knew you wanted to get into. But then, you utilized and found, being an agent and the benefits that come along with that. You utilize those to your advantage in growing what you wanted to do on the investment side. Is that definitely something that are you looking to grow, I guess, as an agent as well, and building a team, or has it stayed pretty consistently just a way to utilize the MLS, find new deals, and grow your rental portfolio?
In the beginning, it was just to grow my rental portfolio, because in 2014, that's so odd, because 2014 to about 17, 18, I would have 10 to 12 saved houses at all times that I just knew, like, this is my next deal. And so I'd always have that pipeline from MLS deals. And, it'd be something would sit out there for $60,000 for 45 to 90 days. And then you make an offer for 45 and they'd accept it. I mean, those deals that's non-existent now.
Hard to find those. Yeah.
And so about 17, 18, my list was getting down to about 3 or 4. Then 19, there might have been 1 or 2. And then 20 was, one might pop up and it's gone within that hour. So my business changed as to what are the best people doing in my market and other markets, and how are they finding those deals. And so that's when my strategies changed from the ML, just waiting for something to fall in my lap, to how are the best people sourcing their own deals. And I think that was about the same time that I had met you. And so that was kind of where our journey started. I dabbled in it a little bit, but I hadn't quite done the business formation and really dove into starting that. And I think I met you when you were 18 or 19.
Right. Yeah, 18, 19, around that time. I was thinking back to that. I met you in your downtown office there. I can't even remember how we got connected, but I was like, okay, here's another young guy that's doing well in real estate thus far. He's doing what I want to do. That was definitely a helpful meeting, and neat hearing what you had going on there, and then of course to where you've come now. But I think it was around that time.
I thought the same thing about you, because that was one of the first experiences I had of someone younger than me doing in the same industry. And once I asked you how old you were, I was like, man, I think you're 4 years younger than me. You're 19, I was 23. And I was like, man, he's 19, he's finding these deals out here. How's he doing that? So I think, you definitely had what am I trying to say? I don't know, backing into how I first started into, sourcing my own deals. Because I bought that deal from you. I think it's your second deal, maybe.
Yeah, third deal ever had.
Third deal.
Yeah, sold it to you.
And that was the second wholesale deal that I actually ever bought from a wholesaler. And so the first one was totally wrong. I had no idea how to do it. And so this guy came to me with a deal. I gave him the fee right there at, like, we met at a coffee shop, and I gave him the fee right there, which I know is totally wrong to do. But I didn't know any different. I was 23. I guess this is just how it happened. And he was like, are you going to pay me here? And I was like, I don't know, sure. And so I gave him the check. We closed on the deal, and I ended up flipping that house. But it's this third deal, and that was the second deal I had bought from wholesale.
Right. That is interesting. I've never heard of a wholesale deal go quite like that. For those that don't know,
don't do that.
You have a purchase agreement for a property, or somebody will have a house under contract. In this case, Michael approached that person, and as they were marketing this house to Michael, and generally, you'll sign an assignment contract so that you now are taking over the contract of the original buyer. You're essentially taking their place in the deal. And usually at closing at the title company, the check will be given, the difference in that commission that the person is making will be given to the initial buyer, that person wholesaling it. And then, Michael would bring all of the funds at once. But it sounds like in that case, you just paid him his assignment check right then and there, and then just bought the house after the fact.
Yep.
So
it's definitely something you shouldn't do, is never give unsecured funds to someone you don't know at a coffee shop.
Yeah, well, definitely some lessons there, but I'm glad it worked out. You still got the house at the end of it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to see then. So you got started into the agent side, market side of things at a certain point, 2020-ish, or when you were 20. And so I was going to see, after that point, we had kind of talked about you had a few houses at this point, your personal residence. Where did things grow from there? I know you said it was kind of a slower build at a certain point, just 2-3 houses a year. Where did things really take off or grow further from there? And what did those next steps look like in using the burst strategy with that?
At that point in time, I think I had 12 houses. And so I had maybe $1.5 million in real estate. And I got to the point, where the deals weren't as often. I wasn't finding, the houses popping up left and right. And so I tried to figure out what are the best people doing. And so I went down through all the YouTube videos, figured out who the best people were. And I really liked videos from a guy named Ryan Dossey. And so I watched 15, 16, 17 hours worth of content of his, 12-minute videos. And he had a mastermind at the time that he had just started, maybe a year before that. So maybe he started in end of 18, maybe 19. And so at the end of 20, I joined his mastermind. Wasn't cheap at the time, it was like, okay, here we go. And so I got to do it. And so I joined that, did his program. And then that was the program to start finding your own deals. How are some of the best people doing it? And there was a mastermind of about 300 people in there at the time that were all doing the same thing. So how fast can I learn this from other people? And so there's days where I sat in front of my computer for 14 hours, just getting the knowledge and bouncing ideas off 300 other people that are doing it in much larger markets than Springfield. And so I kicked it off, and I think I spent my first $5,000 between finding my own deals. So I built my business around Springfield Property Guide, trying to find off-market real estate deals, houses that need work, similar to yourself and a lot of other people in this market that you and I know. And I was like, okay, I need to come up with a budget for marketing. How much am I going to spend? Where am I going to spend it? So I went to SEO, went to Facebook ads, went to direct mail, and then I did some cold calls here and there. And the first $5,000 I spent between deals and then equity through that was about $350,000 in return. So through the buy downs, I call them equity buy downs, which is essentially you're just buying a deal that's undervalued. And then through a couple flips and a couple of wholesales, which I personally have only wholesaled twice, because as a licensed investor, you're really not supposed to take a fee without agency. So there's kind of a fine line you have to run through having your license and wholesaling deals. So I just double close now. So say I were to buy a deal on Thursday, I have to actually sign it over into my name, and then that next Friday I'd sell it for a profit. And so for that first $5,000 I did, it was crazy, and I was hooked. And so after that, I built my business extremely fast, and probably faster than I should have. And there's those nights of your chest gets a little tight, and you wake up at 1:30 in the morning and think about where this is going, how you're doing this, who you're paying, how fast your bank account's going down. So I know where the questions you're going to ask me, this is a good lead into it, was what's some of the best advice you've ever heard? And it was from Brandon Turner on the Bigger Pockets podcast when he said, you can go broke buying good deals. And man, there was a point in time where I had maybe 7 projects going at once. And this was in probably the first year that I was finding my own deals, and how fast I had paid for all the repairs myself, which in retrospect, I don't do that anymore. I get loans for that and the purchase price, but then I paid for all the repairs for myself. And, I was spending $10,000 a week. And so at times there was, like, what do I have to do? I have to sell a house, so definitely a good learning experience there. You can go broke buying good deals.
That's a good line. That's a really good line, because just because it's a good deal and, you're in properties that will make money doesn't mean that, between now and then it's going to go, smoothly because of that, because you do have to have some systems and processes and, all that, the finances in place. But it is amazing to hear. So you're saying you had an initial $5,000 investment in marketing in different places, which turned into $350,000 worth of income in deals that you made. Is that right?
Income and equity. So say there was a house I bought for $150,000. I think that day it might have been worth, $190. I got a good deal for it, made the repairs. And so the equity now I've put $170 into it. Now it's worth $225. And so, there's that equity spread of $50,000. I got quite a few of those. And so between that first, it was probably 3 months, 4 months, and that first $5,000 had been spent. And so it's pretty eye-opening as to how, rapid you could build a business around
Right.
going direct to seller.
Yes. And but it's cool though that obviously there was some growing pains and learning how to balance the incoming deals that you're getting with, the process and making sure you can handle it all. And then later, realizing, okay, I'm going to find the money and the financials for these rehabs and the purchases rather than taking it all on myself and every part of this deal. So it sounds like there were definitely some things you learned throughout that. Was that just a matter of, okay, I tested this, it works, and I'm going to keep just putting this marketing out there and expecting this return, and then just kind of growing, and then, I'll figure out the systems later? How did that growth kind of go from there?
Man, the trajectory from having 2 deals at a time to now doing, as you said, 25 kitchens at once right now, which is miserable. I should have built a business around this before I got to this point, but now I've made 2 hires in the last 2 weeks. And so trying to build a team around, going faster without having to do everything myself. But to go back on your question, was I had that marketing avenue, and then it was how much money could I dump into this? and at the same time not go broke buying good deals. And so I had to figure out, because I didn't have the capital, I mean, for the amount of leads that were coming in. And so there was always these deals that I'd come across, and it's like, man, I would love to keep that, but I just don't have the capacity right now to keep it. And so I'd have to unfortunately give up properties that I liked until I figured out how to bring on debt at a pace that could keep up with my marketing efforts and not overextend myself, but also provide an opportunity to those investors that were earning 0.5% interest at the bank, which is a lot higher now that we have a debt crisis or a banking crisis. But, I was offering 10% and $1,000 fee. And, that's what I was offering to friends and family members. And I got a few investors that way. And that's what I've offered ever since. And I might start taking away the $1,000 fee now, since the 10% kind of seems to be a pretty good deal. The people I talk to, they're like, you're telling me you give me 10% of my money. And, it's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yep, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll do it gladly. Yeah, you start finding those people that are willing to invest, and then it can take a little bit of that weight off of your shoulders of, I don't have to be the one to fully carry the financial burden of all of these projects at once, then allowing you to do more of those that you're like, man, some of these, like you said, you had to turn down or you just didn't have the capacity. When you start, yes, it's more expense and it's going to hurt your all-in price a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, as you can get pretty good rates. Even at 10-15% interest on somebody's money, you end up paying a few $1,000s out on that deal, but you're able to do so many more that it just makes a lot of sense. And I like that. It seems like early on and even throughout, you were willing to throw a lot back into the business, into the renovations and whatever it was. You weren't like just trying to hold on to this nest egg and grow it. You're like, look, I'm investing in this. How much can I put in to where I can still manage and control all of it? Is that something you've kind of kept even through today? Because I know you said earlier on, real estate investors can be very equity rich and cash poor. Is that kind of a philosophy you've kept of just putting it back into the business, putting it back into your deals for the maximum amount of growth?
I felt like when I started, it was really calculated. I'm always very calculated, but it was slow. And now the difference is it's still extremely calculated, because you have to be even more careful with your investors' money, even more than your own money. So you have to be even more careful with your investors' money, but it's the difference of going fast. So I did it the slow way with my own money in the beginning, and now it's building it around how fast can I do it. And I know that there's obviously risks, but I would rather have my capital as a nest egg for whenever, say, a project doesn't go according to plan, than whenever I have my own money in a project that's not going according to plan and I don't have a nest egg. And so it's always better to have that nest egg, bank account that has a significant amount of capital in it while you're trying to build, an exponential business around real estate sales and flipping and building your wealth.
Right. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense that as you are accumulating more properties and rentals and such, that, even early on, as you realized, you've got to have some nest egg, some savings for if those big repairs do come up. And it sounds like the way you were renovating these and the locations and types of properties, probably less maintenance, right, than maybe the average rental even. But at the same time, there's always going to be things. So you've got to grow that savings throughout. And do you have like a set amount that you like to save per property, or do you just have, a general cash reserve that, you feel comfortable with and kind of add on to as you accumulate properties?
I have it as a percentage of portfolio value. And so I like to keep my portfolio right now, I like to keep it between 35 and 39% equity, especially right now because of all the bank runs. And so if you're over leveraged right now, what's a bank going to do? They're going to look at your loans first as this guy bought in 21. He bought a house that was overpriced then. So we have this continuum of pricing going up. So he bought at 21. Say we've stagnated. Maybe prices even gone down. So you pay to the peak, over leveraged, and maybe you're at a 90-10. You're 90% leverage and 10% value. Say we go down 5%. Now you're 95.5. And if, as an investor, if on the bank's books, even if you have you've paid every single loan on time, if you're sitting at 95.5 and someone else is sitting at a 70/30, who is the bank on their loan sheets, balance sheets, you name it? Who are they going to look at first as what assets are we going to get rid of first or call their notes due first? And so I've always tried to be a little bit more equity heavy, especially right now. That's very good advice. Do not pull out 100% MERS right now.
Right. Yeah, avoid those at this time. Just like you said, you got to be cognizant of the market and where we're at and the way things are now versus, a few years ago. And yeah, banks, you can tell, are even tightening up on requiring more equity, in order to refinance deals and even lend on them. So I think that's a huge thing that you're saying there is, yes, you've been growing very fast, adding on a lot of rentals and growing your portfolio, but you're being very mindful of the equity in these deals and how that's going to look to banks, because could you even go potentially faster and, more debt and more properties? Sure. But, there's a healthy balance there of growing, but doing it in a place that is reasonable, makes sense. You have that proper equity, in these deals. So that's, definitely something important that I, for myself, that's like, I've got to, have the proper amount of equity here on these. Now, is that something that, so you said about 35% is where you like to be. I was curious if, in the market today, it can be tough to get a property, renovate it, and then, go through the BRRRR strategy of refinancing and have that 30% equity, 35% even. Are you finding deals that will still allow you to do that? Or do you end up investing some money yourself on most of these in order to hit that equity percentage?
The ones that I've refinanced that I bought, say, 4 or 5 years ago are now at that equity percentage. And so I haven't taken more debt against it. And so I have kept them all. And I wouldn't refinance them now anyways, because, as rates are 8.5%, I have some of these at 3.5, 3.6. This is one of the lowest ones that I have on a $300,000 loan. And so why would I ever double my payment on that? And so right now, I think my portfolio is at 36, maybe 37%. But I will keep it that way for the short term, because if 2020 was the perfect recipe for a disaster. And, at that time I had the chest tightening of, the rent moratoriums, you're not going to have to pay your rent. And so there was definitely the scarcity of, at that time I didn't have the equity and I didn't have the cash reserves. And so if that would have happened, who would have known what would happen to my real estate business? I wasn't in a position, and I'd never been through a catastrophe like that before. And I don't think we've had one similar like that since. But I think, with how fragile our economy is, obviously you've seen the bank runs, is there anything else that's going to, take that dip? And then our bank's going to start to call those notes and say, hey, we need our money back. And hopefully I'm in the middle of the pack of some of those people, because there's one of the first, a girl that I hired last week to my office, she owns real estate herself, and she has 70% equity. And so it's just like, there's people that have even way less and, millions of dollars in real estate have 70% equity, because they've been through that before, and they've seen it happen before, and they've felt those feelings before, and they don't want to have to feel them again. I have an uncle who is one of the most successful real estate investors that I know. Millions and millions, maybe 40, 50 million if I had to guess. And I remember talking to him about it last summer at the pool, and he said he hasn't bought anything in years because he's been here before. And I believe he had went bankrupt before on real estate a long time ago, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And he said he hadn't bought anything in 3 years because he said he's been here before. And I thought that was very interesting, because I'm always in buy mode. There's always a good deal in any market. And so it was interesting to see him having, 20 times the amount of the portfolio that I have, just say something like that because he's been through it. And so definitely take things like that to heart.
Right. No, and it's definitely something to be heard and learned there, because when you have these people like him, him that have been through multiple cycles and have seen the ups and downs, he just knows that's a reality of how things work in the, financial markets and just the economy in general, there are ups and downs, and you want to position yourself accordingly. It's not that the downs are always bad, right? There's still good deals to be had, but you want to position yourself for those, and not just be on such a growth pattern where you're just looking towards buy and everything is a deal because I can finance it. It's like, well, just because you can doesn't mean that maybe you should. And so I think that your mindfulness around equity and making sure you're in the property in a good enough place is huge for growing something long term, right? It's not going to be this short run. You want this to be a long term thing, and that's definitely an important thing to look at. How has your team and your systems grown over the years? We've kind of talked about your growth and your portfolio. Where has it kind of gotten to in the last couple years? And how have you, I think you said you just mentioned you hired somebody on. What does that look like for you today on where you're at this point?
Whenever I started, I did everything. I put in the flooring, I painted the walls. And I transitioned to finally getting to the point where I could hire contractors, because at the time, $25, $30 an hour, and I was making 10 as a busboy. Numbers just don't make sense then. And so I had the construction loans, but I could do the work myself. But there got to a point where, I wanted to scale, and I wanted to get away from doing things myself. So I got actually very, very good contractors. And so I was able to use that for a really long time to manage my own properties, manage my own projects. I still have very good contractors, but now I'm getting more properties than I can, vet these long-term relationships with contractors, because I did not like finding new contractors. And so I try to keep the ones that I have and keep them extremely busy. And it's rewarding for both parties, because they're not out going and giving bids 24/7. And I don't have the inconvenience of finding a new contractor for every new house for, all the different trades. And so now I've gotten to the point where I hired a maintenance guy that's, running all the materials, supplies, measuring for cabinets. So he's kind of more field work type guy. And I've made an incredible hire, and hopefully she could hear me through the doors, as she was in between positions, and I'd actually helped her buy real estate before as an agent, and the last thing I helped her buy was a $650,000 transaction. And so the second that I heard that she was looking for a position, I immediately picked up the phone and I said, name your price, let's do this. And she probably still has more real estate than I do, and she's working for me, and gonna start doing administrative tasks, take over some property management roles, and we're cranking through it, and she's awesome.
Yeah, that's huge. That's when you find somebody like that has the skill sets and the talent there. Yeah, just a matter of jumping on and getting them a part of what you're doing is huge, and recognizing that. So it sounds like, I know you mentioned earlier, you have managed your own properties throughout, and it sounds like she might be able to step in and help in that role of property management. What would you say is the main reason that you've managed throughout? Obviously you've had a lot going on, had, a very busy, several years here growing your portfolio and retail sales. Why, manage yourself? And is that the plan to continue to do that and create your own property management company at some point? Could you dive into that a little?
The reason why I was able to manage them myself was because in the beginning of this podcast, I briefly spoke on it, I stuck to a specific strategy. So I'm doing the 322s, 423s, you name it. Rents are $1,700 in a very good area. And so I spent more time in the beginning managing 4 houses in areas that I didn't like that I do now with 40, I think I'm at 42 or 43. Producing rentals. There's a 17 unit that we have gutted, but the producing rentals, I spend less time on those than I did the 4 in the very beginning, 7 years ago, because I found this strategy around, great tenants, great rentals, and houses that have been remodeled. And so I would spend 3 hours a week maybe on property management. So not very much. The majority of my time was spent on the agency side, and then do the flips as well. And I also just had a baby. She takes up significant amounts of time now too. So I was a workaholic, 12, 14-hour days, 7 days a week. And sometimes you'd have some burnout, but I'm trying to find more life balance and try to fit it into the, get to the office at 7 and leave at 5. And so try to build a team around how can I keep those hours at home with my family. That's why I need to build a team around that.
That's huge. No, that's so cool to hear. And yeah, just that transition and, when you have the time going for it and working and growing, but then, finding just a schedule that works. And I think it's interesting to hear on that, your perspective and experience in managing yourself, because a lot of people might think, real estate, the midnight
chasing toilets
and, they constant headaches. It's like you found a way that you're finding the right properties, the right tenants, and, you treat them right. And, you have systems in place that allow for, rent collection and bookkeeping and all of that, I'm sure. And you're able to only spend so much time on it versus what some might think. And even what I think often is like, oh, that's got to be so much work. So that on top of the fact that you're saving your 10% in those management fees, I think that will probably has gone a long way too, and just allowing you to save up and maybe even reinvest. So
yes, one of the coolest things is you go from the cash flow. I think there's like a pendulum of when you're an investor, where you start and where you finish. And I think in the in-between, you really start to realize what's important. And I think, at least for me, and I think for the people in my sphere, it goes from cash flow, and that's all you worry about, is cash flow, to more of a long-term play. And how much is this going to appreciate, and how much can I manipulate values on larger buildings, apartment complexes, commercial real estate to do that value add, which equals equity. So it's not necessarily just cash flow, which I think is where a lot of people start. Great place to start. But then I think it really evolves into, man, this is a long-term play. I didn't realize how much a $200,000 house can appreciate on paper compared to a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 house.
Right. And that's it's a huge thing to look at over the course of time, because when you get focused on appreciation and that growth, you see the equity in your properties grow and the values are growing more rapidly over time. And then naturally, of course, you're going to each deal make sure you're cash flowing, make sure that the money's coming in, but that will handle itself as you accumulate more properties in a portfolio. And really, you're in it for the long-term wealth building side of, I want this to be, substantial in 10, 20, 40 years. Not so concerned about the today, what's my return, but what are things going to look like in that time? Because if you were just focused on today's return, you could probably get, 3 times as many houses in these, not so great areas that do maybe cash flow better because of the low price, but you're going to be much more set back in the maintenance and the, lack of appreciation and just the extra time and care that you have to take there versus the route you're going. So it just makes a lot of sense.
I think there's, especially when you're starting, you're in spheres and groups and networking events where it's common to say how many units I have. And so I definitely wanted to be on that route. Like, I have 2,000 units, and at the same, I do want to get there eventually someday, but I want to make sure that those units are, I always try to answer the question of would I live there? And so that's one of my main, common core values in investing in real estate, is answering the question, would I live there? If me personally, if I'm 20 years old and that's somewhere where I probably wouldn't live, I'm not going to buy it, or I'm just not going to keep it. That's something I'd look to just, get to disposition and move on from. But, there's a difference between owning $40,000, $235,000 houses compared to, that would equal out to about $160,000, $50,000 to $60,000 houses. So it'd be cool to say that, absolutely. But at the same time, I'm not here to just boost an ego and say, I have 160 houses.
Right. I definitely get you there because, you're in these masterminds, you're talking to other investors, and the unit count.
It's all about unit count.
Yeah, it's like, oh, wow, okay, you're at this many. But it's like, what are those units? Like, are they, because it's totally different. Like you said, you could have 3-4 times as many, and it's the same equity, it's the same value just because of what they are. So just looking at it per deal, what are your criteria? Like you said, would I feel comfortable living here? These questions that are going to benefit you long-term and have properties long term that you want to own and are going to do well in the long run. That's so huge. So for you, kind of moving forward here, what does this year look like? Maybe even what is 5 years from now? Where are you looking to grow? Is it continuing a lot of the same? Are you looking to get into different types of properties? Give us a little insight into that.
So what would this be? 3 months ago, I was still a one-person show. I still tried to do everything myself. And I've came across opportunities and people that I really enjoy being around, and am looking to maybe have my business not go on pause, but maybe even go backwards a little bit so I can grow. And so I'm looking to take capital positions that I have now and go backwards to be able to fund a actual business and start to hire. And so right now, my business, the home buying business, is Springfield Property Guy, and we're actually going to rebrand that, and we're going to have 5 different pillars. And so there's going to be the home buying business, there's going to be property management, there's going to be realty, construction, and then, what's the one I'm forgetting? Oh, there's 5 of them. That sounds unprofessional, but there's 5 of them. I can't think of them on the podcast.
It's not wholesaling, is it?
Home buying, property management, construction, realty. Okay, you think of this.
Stay tuned for the 5th.
Stay tuned for the 5th.
He'll let you know.
I'll think of it before I get to the end of this, but those are our 5 pillars.
Yeah.
And we've created, you probably know what web flows are. You know, how can you fill in a position for each one, what their roles would be. And so we have my new business partner, his name's Jason Gerald. You met him whenever you came by our office that day. He's built a incredible business around one of those odd businesses you could build around, but he's built it to the absolute max. And it's, remarkable to sit down and talk to him about it, kind of what happens. So we've joined forces there, and we put up capital positions together, and we're going to build this business. And our goal is to get to 50 million within 5 years. And so that's our plan. We've been mapping that out, spending the last, 3 months trying to get towards that goal. And so we're going to try to do it right from the beginning instead of just kind of figure out how it goes. So I think we both have enough knowledge about real estate and business to be able to, run a fully efficient business to where there's roles for each industry. And then how can you, scale that?
Yeah.
That's what I look forward to.
Right. Hey, man, I like it. Yeah, 50 million in 5 years. I mean, I'd say you're well on your way there just with the experience that you've built up over the last 8 years, as well as, just the connections you've made, the network you've built. But I think that it's important what you're saying is sometimes you do almost have to pull back a little bit in order to get to a point of just getting good, solid systems in place. Here's our process for how we're going to, take the management. Here's our process for the sales. And when you start from that ground point, at the very beginning, you can build in a solid way versus, I've experienced it some. It sounds like, for you as well, you were just balls to the walls, going crazy, just doing as much as you could. And it's all you, right? You're a one-man show. It limits, a business that you're trying to grow. And so it's so important to, okay, we're going to hire this out. We're going to do this the right way so you can truly grow and scale to, a point where you want to be at 50 million. And I would say you're definitely doing it the right way of let's break it down, make sure we know how to get there.
5th pillar, which is kind of, I guess this is why I didn't even think of it, was our capital and holding side. So we're just going to have an independent team around, raising private capital and putting that into our holdings.
Got it. I like that. 5 pillars.
Mm-hmm.
That's, that'd be a great setup for moving forward here. So just a little bit of a transition. We've got 4 questions that we ask each guest, and I want to just fire those at you. And you touched on the first. So if you could, if that's what it is here, what is one of the best pieces of advice that you've been given?
So I listened to 371 Bigger Pockets podcast episodes in a row before it started becoming redundant. There's probably still some good nuggets that you could still, obviously find on there, new people, new strategies, new ideas, but it was probably 2/3 of the way through there. And it was at a time where it resonated with me when I thought, 5 deals at once was a lot, which it was, 5 years ago, to buy 5 houses at once and then allocate for all the expenses myself, which was, you can go broke buying good deals.
Right. It's huge. It's huge. Yeah. Finding the right deals is key, but making sure you have the capacity to take those down and do it the right way.
Because if someone came to me today and said, do you want to buy 100 single family rentals at a good deal? I probably wouldn't have the capacity to take them all down on my books. I just wouldn't. And I'm not scared to say that. There's part of me that wants to say, I figure it out. There's part of me that says this is probably a stupid decision to try to figure it out. And so I'm not afraid to kind of sit there and take that extra 5-10 minutes and really think hard about, is this a good idea or not? And instead of just being, the young gun that's like, absolutely, let's do it. And so I'd think of a different strategy. Obviously, you might take 30 of them down and try to get rid of the other 60 at the same time. But yeah, that's definitely what I would think about now, is you can go broke buying good deals.
That's good. Yeah. You're in it for the long haul here, and you're not just trying to make it today, tomorrow, even this year. You're looking, will I be able to do 100, at once? Absolutely. But I'm going to be understanding of where I'm at currently and what makes sense for my business and for where I'm at. That's good. What is one of your favorite business books?
I know with all the podcasts I listen to, it's definitely Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I enjoy Robert Kiyosaki's content. I think he's a little arrogant sometimes, but another book that I really like of his is Why the Rich Are Getting Richer. Pretty much is the sequel to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but it goes into a bunch of different industries and why Rich Dad, Poor Dad is the way it is, and kind of gives more background into why that book makes sense. And then the other two that I had is The Shoe Dog, which is the story about Nike, and it's like the ultimate entrepreneur's story of just getting kicked down into the dirt. How many times can that happen before you get that break? And I don't think I've necessarily been kicked down in the dirt too many times, but I obviously probably you've had those situations where, man, this is getting tough. I'm going to have to make a change of direction. And so that was definitely one of my favorite books, The Shoe Dog, story about Nike and how they got started. And then the third one, going 3, is The E-Myth. I love the E-Myth book. It opens your eyes into how to delegate tasks and how to build a business around not doing everything yourself. And so how you can exponentially grow by not doing that.
Right. Those are good. Wow. Those are really good. I haven't read the Shoe Dog book yet, but it's on my list. I definitely want to get to it. I was curious, at what point in your real estate journey did you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Earlier, later?
This would have been 2019. So about halfway through.
Okay.
I came across it, and everybody on Bigger Pockets recommended it, and so I bought it, and I think I finished it in like 3 days.
Yeah.
So it was definitely eye-opening. I thought I had a majority of the principles already, not working directly for a paycheck. And so seeing those hours and hours go by where you don't have any income, I feel like I lived that life for a few years, but it just exemplified and put an exclamation point onto why it's beneficial.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree more. It just gives such a good framework for business, real estate, and acting as more of an investor than just a self-employed or employee mindset. It's huge. Third question here for you. What is one characteristic or character trait that you notice successful people commonly share?
It was tough because there's so many. If you think about the people that there's so many. So I tried to, obviously really hone in and think about why are they in the position they're in. And it's usually, in my eyes, what I see is it's the relentless pursuit of finding out information. And it's compounding on it. The more you learn, the more you earn. We've all heard that. And so I don't think there could be anything more true about an entrepreneur of, like, tomorrow, you and I are probably going to sit down and think, what can we learn today? Not only information-wise, but maybe just in our business and how we can get, improve certain aspects of our business. And it's always just that. It's ingrained in our mind of that relentless pursuit of wanting and needing more information on how to grow. And you don't realize it, but it's always in your brain of, it's just how can I get better? It's asking the question of how can I get better? That's, in my personal opinion, on the characteristic of highly successful people.
Right. That's good. I haven't heard it put quite that way, but it's so true. As the investor, you've got to be, or as an entrepreneur, you've got to be constantly educating yourself, looking your business. How do I grow? How do I improve and better myself, my team from yesterday? Mm-hmm. And that's going to lead to further success. And instead of getting complacent, like you're touching on, is because you can plateau and you can just remain where you're at, or you can continue to achieve higher goals. And that's exactly what a lot of these successful people carry. So, fourth question here for you. I just want to see, where can people connect with you if they want to talk more? Where are you at?
Man, I'm not a huge social media guy, and as I told you on here, this is my first podcast I've ever been on, but I do have a page on Facebook. It's the Springfield Property Guy, and we're actually, as I maybe just mentioned, that we're going to rebrand here soon to include all 5 pillars, and we're going to be under the name of Hive, Hive. And so that's going to be focused around those 5 things. We wanted to think about community, hard work, and then obviously your beehive. How hard they're working they're working as a community. And so we thought that name would work well for where we want to be. And so we're going to rebrand it as Hive. And then, as you know, it's probably on everybody's schedule to get a social media /marketing person. And so that's on our web flows, obviously, but we're just not in a position yet. So we should start rolling out more stuff. I'd say probably in the next 6 months, we've had that position covered.
Right. Hey, I'm excited to see it. I'll definitely be tuned in myself and seeing the progression there as that grows. I think, I'm excited to see where you continue to take things, and it's neat seeing where you're, again, our meeting, years ago, and how you've even grown since there, and just the way that you continue to improve yourself and educate yourself of how you can take things to the next level. One last thing, any other thoughts, or is there a question that you wish I would have asked you that I didn't? Anything else that is on your mind?
There's part of me that wants to, fall into the trap of like the unit count and how much you make a month and things like that. How was your year compared to last year? And about financial numbers, which I guess that's a question for you if you would even want to ask people questions like that. Because I know me, whenever I look for information, is this person making $50,000 a year, or are they making $50 million a year? And when I see that number, I want to get more information from that person, and I will follow that person. And so that might be a question that you ask your future followers, maybe number specific, which I know some listeners are like, oh, I don't care about that stuff. He's just boasting. But, for some people that are in our industry, I really enjoy hearing that. Like, are you making $300,000 a month in passive income? If you are, I want to learn from you, and I'll probably start to follow your information a little bit more. So
Exactly.
That might be a good question to ask.
I think that's a great question, actually, and something that, because, certain people may not be as interested in hearing or others sharing on the specifics, but I think that when you give those details, often it can give it can get really practical and a lot of good insight into, okay, this person's grown their company to this point. Yeah, what do those actual numbers and things look like?
On other podcasts, that you and I have obviously probably listened to, there's been 20-year-old kids that make $700,000 a year in real estate. It really opens your eyes as like, man, what am I doing sitting here making $40,000? And so I think that's where a lot of people's journeys start, when they're sitting under the fluorescent lights in their office, making not what they think that they could, where they could be at and where other people are at, that there's similar ages as them. And so I think that's, a good insight of the podcast. I listen to people that are younger than me, doing 4 times as many deals, making 10 times as much money. Who knows if they're blowing smoke, but it's good to see kind of their perspective.
Yes, it is great to hear that. And just get insight into other people that can motivate and inspire you, on your journey as well. And I would say, this has been really good. Great conversation with you, Michael. I appreciate you coming on here and just giving us a little insight into your journey with things. Definitely check out Michael on social media, as he had mentioned there, and following his next steps. But thank you for coming on.
You bet. Hopefully we can do it again.
Yes, definitely will. Have a good one here.
All right, you as well.
We'll see you.